What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of Weekly Wisdom. If you're new here, then know that absolutely everyone is welcome. Men, women, atheist, agnostic. If you have a different religion, everyone is welcome. So whether you agree or disagree with what I believe, you're welcome to stay. So this episode is going to be, I guess you could say, over mental health, self-love, whichever way you want to put it. I will give a fair warning. I do have a sinus infection right now, so if I sound a little bit stuffed up, that's the reason why. But anyways, mental health is something that I think almost everyone will struggle with at one point in their life. For some people, it may be anxiety, some people depression, or maybe some of the other battles that can go on in your mind. But regardless of what that mental struggle is for you, or what necessarily the root is of it, maybe it was something you did, maybe it was something someone did to you, maybe an event happened in your life that kind of kickstarted all these problems, or maybe it's just life in general. Either way, I know a lot of people who really struggle with their mental health, and I can say from personal experience how draining it can be to deal with those problems. I know in the first episode when I talked a little bit through my testimony without going into great detail, because of that lack of not getting into the specifics, it did kind of appear when I was watching it back that I skipped over a lot. But certain details of my testimony that weren't so much included with great detail would have been my struggle with mental health. For me, I suffered a lot with depression and anxiety for a while. When you're in a rough spot with your mental health, it's a rough spot to get out of. And it does come to points where you just feel like you're never going to get out of there. And while I can say now that I've beaten that anxiety and that depression and everything else that I was dealing with, I give the full credit to God. Sometimes we get caught up too much in the world. When things in this world are beating you down, maybe you had a hard day at work, maybe you just got your heart broken. Maybe it's something that you think is stupid that He doesn't want to hear about. He does. Go sit with Him. Talk with Him. Be in His presence. Silent. Don't even have to talk. Be in communion with Him. I think a lot of us get so caught up in trying to be perfect for God when it's impossible to be perfect. So every time that we fail, we fall back into this cycle of, I don't feel good enough. Maybe I should stray away from God, run away from Him, or maybe I can try to face Him, but I don't feel like I'm good enough still. We have to break that cycle. And said cycle is one that I'm still trying to break myself. A lot of times, I'll do something that may not even be necessarily a big deal, but I still think, I don't imagine Him liking that I just did that. So I pray for forgiveness, but then still think to myself, why are you doing the things you do? If we jump over to Romans 7:15, it says, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now if I do what I do not want, I agree with the law, that it is good. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing." Sums it up perfectly. We get so caught up in trying not to sin, trying not to do this or do that it starts messing with your head. And that leads you to that stretch of, I'm not good enough for Jesus. He's ashamed of me. Your flesh is always going to crave these things. We have to understand, and it's so obvious, but we forget it because our mind is so clouded by the enemy. God knows that we are not capable of being perfect. That's why He died on the cross for us. He's not ashamed of you. He's not disgusted by you. If He was so ashamed and disgusted that you would do those things, He wouldn't have even bothered dying on the cross. God does not hate you because you sin. There's the saying that I hear all the time, but it's true. God hates the sin, not the sinner. And that pain that can arouse from all this chaos going on in your mind, He knows that pain. He carried that pain on the cross with Him. He knows what you're experiencing. He knows what you're going through. You have to keep in mind that when Jesus was on earth, He was human. He felt the things that we felt. That means He got hungry. That means He felt pain. That means He got thirsty. A very well-known story in the Bible is when Jesus was tempted in the desert by Satan. He experienced that temptation to sin. He experienced everything that we experience. And if you're still caught up in, I've asked for forgiveness, I know He forgave me, but I haven't forgiven myself, let it go. Without even realizing it, when we can't forgive ourselves, but we say He's forgiven us, that's almost saying that our forgiveness is more important than His. He's not ashamed of you. He hates the sin that you committed, but He doesn't hate you. He loves you, and He doesn't want you running away from Him when you mess up. And a verse that I absolutely love for this is Isaiah 1:18. where it says, the Lord says, please come so that we can talk about this together. If your sins are like a red stain, they will become as white as snow. Even if they are bright red, they will become like white wool. God knew every single thing that you were going to do before you were even born. And those thoughts that come to you that say, I've messed up too much, that's not from him. That's from the enemy. God knew every single thing that you were going to do, every sin that you were going to commit, and he still chose you. You know, if you think that you're worse than everyone else on this planet, you're not. We're all sinners. We all mess up. Don't be so hard on yourself. Because even some of the biggest names in the Bible had their problems. King David had an affair. Noah was a drunk. Every single one of these bigger characters in the Bible had problems. So stop trying to live up to the false expectation that you can be perfect. You can't be perfect, and Jesus knows that. Now, that doesn't mean that, okay, well, I can't be perfect, I should just go do whatever I want. Don't do that. Whatever darkness it is that you're dealing with, understand that God uses that, even if you cannot see it, and you've probably heard that a million times now. Recently, I've been struggling a lot with certain aspects of my faith, and it's pushed me to my limits, and I don't know what good can come from it. And that's something we get caught up in too, is why God, why did you put me through this? And sometimes we try to make that the most important part instead of just trusting in Jesus. We get so caught up in our own head that we're relying too much on ourselves and our own understandings instead of him. But the reason I brought up my own example was just to show that just a few weeks ago, I was at a point where I was like, what am I doing wrong? Did I mess up or something? Am I living in a sin that I'm not realizing? Starting to run thoughts through my head that didn't even need to be there, that were not from him. But then you fast forward to now, and I'm glad I went through that. It's hard to see, and it's hard to be glad when you're going through these types of things. But trust me, he'll come through. He has a reason for all of it. And there's many verses that are very similar to this in its meaning. This comes from James 1:2-3. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Or if we jump over to 1 Peter 5, this one's very similar to that as well, but it's also talking about how we need to wait. This is 1 Peter 5:10. Yes, you will suffer for a short time, but after that, God will make everything right. He will make you strong. He will support you and keep you from falling. He is the God who gives all grace. He chose you to share his glory in Christ. That glory will continue forever. All power is his forever. Man, the Bible really, it'd be giving the best answers. I know we go to a lot of other people a lot of times with our problems trying to get help from them, and that's fine. But one thing that I found is that Jesus and the Bible are the best therapist. And using my example from the past couple weeks, one of the things that struggle, which the specifics of it don't matter, but one of the things that I learned from that was how to use that struggle as a positive. Use it as a learning opportunity, as a growth opportunity. Understand, when you get knocked down, don't just jump right back up and then fall back down to the same thing again. When you fall down, without overwhelming your mind, try to understand why you fell. When you fall, try to understand what Jesus is doing. And sometimes I will say, you can't. Sometimes that answer isn't there. But sometimes it's because he's trying to tell you something that he allows you to fall. Don't ignore the thoughts that are running through your head, because a lot of times they're key tells of what's going on. Take your thoughts captive, even the small little dumb thoughts that you may have throughout the day. Say you're being tempted by something and you're having these thoughts that you don't want to be having. Grab those thoughts and take them captive and try to understand why you're having those. You know, in the end, when it comes to struggling the way that so many people do, trust in Jesus. Trust in him, because I promise you that if you give your all to him, he's going to change your life. In Matthew 11:28, it says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." It doesn't say go to this person, go to that person, go to this thing, go to that thing. It says come to me. And that's something that I think we all we try to rely on our own understandings of things. So we think, oh, well, it's best if I go to this person for this thing. You're probably saying, well, I've gone to him so many times and I don't think anything's happening. Like we've talked about, you have to trust the process. That process can be long sometimes and draining, but there's a reason for that. It's to strengthen you. It's to help you grow. In many cases, when you pray, you're not going to get that answer right away. But don't lose faith because things aren't going by your time. Most of the time, it doesn't happen when you think it's going to happen or as fast as you want it to happen. And it's not always about figuring out, well, why is it taking him so long? It's more so about just trusting the process. There's always a reason for why he's doing it. You're not always going to know the reason. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. It could be because he wants you to grow in this area of your life. Or maybe it's because he's giving you time to let something go that should not be brought with you to the next chapter of your life. Regardless of what that thing is or what the multiple reasons are, trust him and understand that it's okay to feel burdened, to feel stressed, to feel overwhelmed. It's okay. All those struggles that I just mentioned that you feel and that so many others feel, Jesus felt those too. He understands what those feel like. He knows it doesn't feel good, but he also understands that good can come from it. Why do you think that so many people turn to Christ in a time of struggle? I can say for myself, and I know others with similar experiences, we didn't truly meet God for the first time at church. We met him when we were at our lowest point, where we felt like we couldn't go on anymore. We had nowhere else to go but to him. So many people have stories like that. So that struggle that you're going through, whether you fully know Jesus yet or not, if you ever have those thoughts of, maybe this world would be better off without me, I've had those thoughts before. It was a long time ago, but I can promise you joy will come in the morning. And I don't necessarily mean that literally, but pain may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. I promise you that. And I know you don't know me, but I promise you the good from all this bad is coming. God sees you trying. He knows how hard you're working to better yourself mentally, physically, spiritually. He sees that, and he's not throwing that aside. He's using it. And just remember that when God was designing this beautiful universe of ours, he really looked at it and said, hey, that needs this guy in there. It needs you in there. That's what he said. So if you think that you aren't a good enough man, that you aren't the man you wish you would be at this point in time, give it to Jesus. Trust in him. Put your own ego aside, that many of us men have, and many women too, but put that aside and give it all to him. And every single one of us has given God a million different reasons on why he should not love us. And he still does. Maybe something hard happened in your life, or maybe you did something that you're not proud of. Nothing's too big for God to handle. And sometimes even the simplest thing can change your mood, is what I'm finding a lot. Sometimes if we're all of a sudden having a rough day, people underestimate a good nap. I'm not saying a nap is a cure-all, but sometimes it is. I could be wrong, and I haven't looked this up, but I'm pretty sure there is a verse in the Bible where someone takes a nap and they feel better afterwards, and they were having like a midlife crisis beforehand, but they took a nap and everything was better. If you're having a rough day, don't put so much pressure on yourself. That kind of made it seem like I think naps are the medicine for all. I wasn't making that point. I don't know what I was doing. But one of the things I'd like to end on is not necessarily specific to mental health, but it's something I still think is very important, and that's being able to distinguish the voice of God versus the voice of the enemy. Now, when I say the voice of God, am I meaning he's going to talk to you in a godlike voice saying, go do this, go do that? For me personally, I've never experienced it in that way, but there also is no limitation on how God can communicate with us. For certain people, they may hear God's voice verbally. For certain people, it may be through their feelings and emotions. For others, it may be their thoughts, through the Bible, or it could be an infinite amount of ways. For me personally, it's usually my thoughts or emotions, and sometimes that can be very hard to distinguish between, is that just me saying that, or is that God trying to guide me? I do that way too often. In most cases, I can tell just based off of what's actually being said. If it's something that goes against what my flesh is desiring, that's a pretty key tell for me, at least. I do feel as if a lot of times it's our thoughts and the way we are thinking and how we interpret the thoughts that are coming towards us. Because sometimes it does feel like certain thoughts just come completely out of nowhere, and then they're on your mind for the rest of the day. It's sometimes hard to distinguish, well, who is that thought from? And don't get into the mindset of every single thought's from God or from the enemy. Don't do that. And it seems pretty obvious, but sometimes I need reminded. And that's the enemy's voice, whether it be about you, something you're doing, whatever. He tries to make you worry. He tries to make you obsess. He tries to scare you. He tries to make you feel discouraged. But on the other hand, God will make you feel calm and peaceful, or in many cases even feel convicted, because his goal is to not leave you in a place where you feel confused. God will help you to feel reassured rather than everything that the enemy is trying to make you feel. So keep that in mind when you're struggling with something. and all you're hearing is negative thoughts, that's not God. He's not ashamed of you and punishing you and saying to you, you're a disappointment. Where'd that come from? And sometimes it's hard to not get caught up in those thoughts, but those thoughts are from the enemy. He's trying to get you off your God-given path. Don't fall for it. No matter what you're dealing with, stand strong. Keep your faith. Don't give up on God, because all these hard things that are happening to you, all this struggle, is a sign that he's working in your life. For what reasons? It could be many. But instead of spending so much time trying to figure out, well, what's he trying to do in my life? What's he trying to do in my life? What's he trying to do? Instead, just focus on Jesus. Focus on Jesus and he will handle the rest. If he wants you to move, he's going to make you move. If he wants you to stay, just be still. Watch for his guidance, because that can come in many ways. If it wasn't for the struggle, you wouldn't have any strength. That's how he develops us into some of his strongest disciples, is by through that trial. And I know at one point in the last episode I spoke more specifically for the men, and of course the women can listen to this and relate to it as well. But guys, I know it's hard to be a man in our current society. I know it's hard for women in their own regards too. And I know the Bible can sometimes be a little bit daunting, because we are called to live up to these high expectations to be a man. But if you trust in Jesus and fully live your life according to him, he's going to change you into the man you need to be. And that's different for all of us. He's working in my life different than he's working in your life or your friend's life or your brother's life or whoever's life. Trust in him, because he's not going to lead you astray. Long story short, when it comes to this area of mental health, you're not alone in this. This is an area that so many people have struggled with. Have they been through what you're going through specifically? Maybe some certain aspects of it, but only you have been through what you're going through. But with that being said, like we said before, Jesus understands it. He understands every single aspect of it. And not just because he was human, but because he is also God. And he's been with you throughout all this struggle that you've been going through. He's been there the whole time. Now, is that saying that when you give your life to Jesus that everything is going to instantly get better? No, that's not what it means. But if I compare my life now, fully having a life surrendered to Jesus, versus when my life was not devoted to Jesus, the difference in how I deal with struggle, such as depressive thoughts or anxiety or whatever it may be, the difference, it's night and day. I still struggle quite often, but he brings a sense of peace that is almost indescribable. It's a peace during the struggle. You can view it as like an umbrella. It can be pouring down rain on you, but the umbrella is keeping you dry. It's keeping all that water from getting on you. But anyways, that is all I got for you guys today. Pray you all have a blessed upcoming week. If there's any specific topics you guys want me to cover, or if you have any specific questions that you just want to ask down below in the comments, by all means, I will try to help you in the best way I can. But anyways, guys, with all that being said, I will see you in the next one.